In our last section, I want to cover another part of interaction layer, which is the creating the animation. We may want to create transition that when we change the data or we show a change or anything that we want to show a change, we can use it gracefully with transition. React offers many ways to create transition. For example, we got the CSS transition that is just the all plain CSS that you may know from HTML. Then we have the CSS in JS modules, and then we can actually use D3 for transition. So this part of the lecture, it's really all about giving you all the options, and then you can decide what works for you. So those are the main ones, but there's also more because we're using React and we can include other modules and library. What we're going to start with is we're going to start with the CSS in JS module. Those are really popular option to styling React application because they integrate really closely with your React component, and they have features that allowing you to change the properties and passing them from your prop into the style and into the animation. The template that I gave you already include inside Material UI that has a style component inside, and I also included style component library so we can use that. Other options for CSS in JS modules are emotion and style jacks, so you can check some of the other options. If you check the ebook that comes with this lecture, it has more details and you can pick something else, and you can see also the difference between the Material UI and the style component. The style component, I like it better because it has things that the Material UI style component don't have. For example, we can render the CSS conditionally using the props, using the style component. It has a SAS support, and we can actually type in using template literal syntax for CSS, as you're going to see I'm going to be doing, and it has much more. So I prefer that, but you can also use the Material UI. You can use a different CSS in JS module, so it's really up to you. What we're going to be building in this section is I'm going to be building this pulsating circles. So we're going to create a pulsating circles that we need later because we're going to be using it in the world map that we're going to be building later. So I'll show you how to build it in two ways. We're going to be building it first as CSS in JS modules, and then we're going to use it D3 to create the same thing. So let's get started. Okay, we're going to start off by creating a component. We're going to call it, first we're going to create a directory. I'm going to be calling it pulsating circle, and inside the directory I'm going to create a new file and call it the same, pulsating circle.tsx. And now let's start off by creating a function component. So our function component is going to have the same name, so just use default export default function pulsating circle, and inside we're going to pass some properties. So we're going to use props, and we're going to set an interface. So let's set our interface. So interface pulsating circle, and in our interface I'm going to be passing two properties that we can set from the parents component. I'm going to be passing the CX, it's going to be a number, and the CY, it's going to be a number. Now when we're working with circle, and we've been working with different SVG element, you can take a look here that what we have is we have a cheat sheet that I'll leave you a link for that. It's an SVG cheat sheet, and if we're working with circle, you could see that there's a few things we can set. We can set the CX, CY, and the radius, and this cheat sheet shows us all the different SVG element like a rectangle or a path, and then it shows you all the different properties that you can set on that. For example, view box that we're going to be using, it controls the artboard. So if you're not sure about the properties, this is one of the cheat sheet that I recommend, but there's plenty others. Let's get back to our code. So we're going to be setting the CX and CY from the parent component, and we're going to pass it into our style component. So now we have our function component set, and we got the interface. Now the next step is we'll just put a return. In our return, right now we're just going to put an empty tag. That's it. And now what we can do is we can create our style component, and we can create our CSS. So our CSS is going to look like it's going to be a function, but it's really going to be it's going to be a function, but it's inside of our function. We're going to set the CSS and pass the properties. Take a look. So what we're doing is we create a constant. Let's call it circle pulse, and then inside of it we're going to pass two properties: color1 of type string and color2 of type string. And this is the colors. When we set the pulse setting circle, it's going to have two colors, if you remember. Let's take a look again. It has two. We want to set it with two colors, so the green will pulsate, and that's why we're going to be passing two colors into our function. And what we can do is, since we're going to be using animation, we don't need to close the bracket, but what we need to do, let's move it one line down so you can see it. What we can do is we can call keyframes, and then use template. And in our template, we're going to do a few things. We're going to set all the different percentage, just like we do in CSS. So we're going to set the 0%, we're going to set the 50%, and we're going to set 100%. This is, all pure CSS. Now see the difference. Now the difference is we're going to be changing the fill. So the fill is going to be first color1 that we're passing. So from 0 to 50, it's going to be color1, and then we're changing it to color2. And then from 50 to 100, back to color1. Okay. We're also going to do something else. We're going to change the stroke. This way it's going to pulsate. First, we change it from 20 pixel to 2 pixel, and then back into 20 pixel. Then don't forget the comma here, as we do in CSS, and we're closing it, looking good. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to set the style component. So we're going to create a function. We're going to call it style inner circle, and that's going to be of type styled. Let's import it, that circle, and again I'm going to use the template. And in our template, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be animating using the CSS we created. So I'm going to create animation, and again this is just CSS, right? And I'm opening and closing my brackets, and then inside we're passing a function that's going to return, it's going to return that circle pulse we created with the two colors that we need. So we're going to have the two colors. Color1, I have the color ready for us. It's RGB. You can pass hex or RGB or RGBA, anything you want. 245, 197, 170. And the second color is going to be 242, 121, 53. Then the other thing with the animation that we need to do is we need to set the infinite. So it's going to pulse it all the time for 4 seconds in type linear. Now this is all pure CSS. The style, I need to import it. Here it is. It's got imported. It's importing the keyframe, but not the style for some reason, so I have to type it, so I'll just type it here. And then we get an error here. Let's see what it says. We need to import React, right? So import React. So now we got React, we got everything imported. Now when we render it, what we need to do is, I'll show you, let's just format it better. We got the open and close tag. Here we go. And now what we're going to be doing is we're just going to call that style in a circle, and we're going to pass for the CX, we're going to pass the properties from the parent component, and for the CY, again, we're going to pass the property from the parent component of the CY. And then also for circle, we need to set the radius, so we'll set the radius to 18. The color, let's set it up to lime green. That will look good on our gray background. And let's set up a stroke width. So stroke width, let's set it to 5 and close the tag. There you go. Yeah, look like we don't have any errors. The only, you can see here we got unused default export because we're not using it yet. So let's implement that. So we got everything ready, right? We created the CSS style pulse that we use it in our style circle. We use it as a function and we passed the RGB colors. Then I think we got an error here. Yeah, on color 2, it needs to be RGB and open and close that. Yeah. RGB, and the quote needs to be here. Okay. And we got one more problem here. I need to put a closing bracket. Okay, here we go. Looking better. I hope it's going to work. Let's see. Now to implement that, what we need to do is let's get rid of the other component from the previous lesson we had. We don't need that. And what we're going to implement that, what we're going to be doing is we're going to create an SVG. You can create a component for that. I'm not going to create another component. I'm just going to implement it just here. I'm just going to add an SVG, and then we need to set a width. We need to set a height. And we can control the size of it using viewbox. Remember we saw it at that cheat sheet. So we can set the viewbox to the size that we want. And inside of our RGB we can add a group. And then we'll add our pulsating circle. And we'll set the CX and CY, let's set it to 100 by 100. It's the location of it. And we'll close that tag. Let's see, we don't have any errors. Okay, looking good. Look, we don't have any errors. Let's take a look. Let's refresh. Here we go. So you can see we created the pulsating circle using the install CSS.